Johnson, welcome to this new episode with the International Unity Club and TAS. It is a program dedicated to promoting dialogue between the people of Russia and the people of the United States. As an American citizen, I think it's extremely important that my fellow citizens understand that they have a lot of bad misconceptions about Russia. And so today we're going to get some of those clarified and enlightened with Sergey. Now, I'm going to attempt your last name. You know, I can tell that you've got to be one of the smartest people in the world, because when you were a child beginning school and you had to spell your name, you got to use most of the alphabet. You know, in my place, you know, in America, Smith, Jones, very simple name, but Bezdenezhnykh, is that close enough?
Yes, you did a good job. Well, the point is that this problem emerges only when I am traveling overseas. Well, I was in Switzerland, and it was indeed a problem to pronounce my surname. Well, the pronunciation problem. As to the Russian language, it is not a problem.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you translate my name, it's a pretty difficult translation, but pronunciation is okay in Russian.
What's the ethnic roots of your last name? Is it Russian, Cossack, what?
I am from the region of the Kirov region on the Vyatka River. My father is from that region, and all my forefathers were born there. Then they migrated to the Far East. My parents were Komsomol members, and they received an assignment to work in the Far East, and they lived there.
Oh, okay. So you're now, would it be proper to call you sort of a native of Siberia?
The Far East.
Okay, the Far East.
За Сибирью.
Yeah, help me
Far East
understand
is
the difference
located
between,
further.
say, Siberia and the Far East.
Siberia is practically the center of Russia. The Far East is everything that is further closer to China and Alaska. Everything that stretches from Siberia to Alaska is the Far East.
Oh, okay.
For you to understand it.
Yeah, one of the problems I think Americans have in general trying to understand Russia is they do not understand how big it is. Because from where you live is what, 10 time zones to the east?
Yes, that's true. Yesterday, to be able to see you today, we had to fly for 9 hours. That was 9 hours in the air, flying, a long-distance flight.
Yeah, that is. How does a government control that much territory? You know, because and let me preface that by saying, Russia seems to be a particularly efficient and effective government in providing services to all of its people across a vast, vast expanse of land.
In actual fact, the territory is indeed vast, and compared to other countries, it is much harder for our government to manage, for example, roads, railroads. You can imagine how far our highways or railroads stretch. But if you go to Khabarovsk and our region, you will see that the distance between two big cities is 400 kilometers. This is the distance from Khabarovsk to Komsomolsk on Amur. And I used to travel in Europe, in Italy, for example. If you leave a tourist route, then you will see that roads are not well maintained. But if you take our highway, you will notice how much cleaner it is and how well kept our highways are. Though, of course, we do have challenges that are associated with the vast territories and the length of our highways and roads. I used to drive my car, and I think in 2010 we acquired that opportunity when money were invested in building a highway from Khabarovsk to the city of Chita, and I had a chance to drive along that highway by car. And now these days one can easily drive from Khabarovsk to Moscow by car. Even in the Soviet times, this would have posed a huge problem.
Now, this may sound like a silly question, but let me take you back to my childhood. So in the 1960s, when we'd be driving in the car and you'd stop and get some fast food, like a hamburger or something, and you had trash, we routinely in the 50s and into the 60s would just throw the trash out the window, and there'd be trash all along the streets. Then it was in the late 60s they started this campaign to stop throwing trash out of the car. Now, I have driven around Moscow and south of Moscow, and I've never seen trash out on the side of the road. Was there ever a campaign in Russia to tell people don't throw trash out of your car, or was it just Russians were naturally clean?
Well, it is not something that is acceptable these days. Even ordinary people can rebuke you if you try to throw trash out of your car windows. So people stopped throwing trash. We had a similar problem in 1990s when people didn't care a fig. But when people saw that roads and highways began to be properly maintained, then people started being more careful, and they took care not to litter streets and roads.
How did the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the emergence of Russia, how did that affect you personally? Because you live, I've heard stories of how it's affected people here in Moscow, but you were living 10 time zones away. How did that affect you and your family?
Well, basically, our cities and towns there are the so-called mono towns or mono cities, which means that there is one core production facility, whether it belongs to the defense industry or pulp and paper industry. And we indeed found ourselves in dire straits, in a very difficult situation when all manufacturing and large production plants stopped operating. Huge pulp and paper factories stopped down. And when Yeltsin was at the helm, the defense industry factories were practically closed down, and people were not being paid salaries and wages. And most people were trying to grow vegetables and fruit road, and this is how they survived. And some people just had some random income here and there. And this was a very difficult time, full of hardships and ruin. The crime rate was very high across the board. And I keep recollecting those Democrats and reformists when we were suffering from hardships. They were playing lawn tennis. They were celebrating, and we were surviving. I still remember those times, those 1990s, and basically, thank God, after the year of 2000, and in early 2000, by 2010, the country was being rebuilt, and payouts were stabilized. There were new laws adopted that prohibited companies not to pay people's salaries. And basically, we started the restoration of the country. And basically, if we look at our cities and towns in the Khabarovsk region, which is called Khabarovsk Krai, and if we compare the status quo with 1990s, you would see a huge difference.
This was there foreign capitalists, foreign oligarchs coming in? Do you recall that back in the 90s, trying to get control of these Russian companies?
Of course I do. I started being engaged in politics step by step, and of course we were keeping track of the developments, and we were watching how major companies attracted foreign capital, and high-level government officials succeeded in attracting foreign capital. But as far as I understand, there was no success. The outcome was not successful. The so-called investors were trying to bankrupt companies, lock, stock, and barrel. There was no development, and they were squeezing those companies dry.
Now, you're involved with politics within your, and then that, what is it? It's called Khabarovsk Krai. So you're involved with the legislature there. How did you get involved with politics?
Well, I started getting involved in politics in search of justice, because we saw how the ruling class was actually living in clover. And we saw that what they were doing to this country and how people responded. I think that our parents made a mistake when they tried not to interfere. And this acute feeling of justice has driven me to get engaged in politics. Maybe I would have chosen a different calling, not politics, but I was kind of pushed into politics by life per se, and we had to take things into our own hands, our destiny into our own hands.
Yeah, I've spoken with several other members of the Duma, and all have expressed, at the national level, and all have expressed sort of a similar experience, the motivation for getting involved, the injustice they saw and the desire to try to correct it. Now, speaking of injustice, how is it that you're on all the sanction lists? What did you do to be sanctioned? I mean, you seem like a nice guy to me.
Well, our legislation reads that Duma deputies, senators, all parliamentaries have to work, have to vote, to adopt laws, to vote for bills and drafts, but no one can punish them for exercising their duty and for expressing their opinions by voting. And even if your opinion is different, and we represent different parties. We have Just Russia, the Communist Party, United Russia, and if the opinion of one party runs contrary to the opinion of the ruling party, and we vote against a particular bill, I'm sitting here in front of you. No one has ever punished me for my opinions, though I am in opposition. I'm an opposition parliamentary, and my opinion differs from the opinion of the ruling party to a great extent. But the Western community, due to some reason, has decided that if a parliament member has voted for example, for the launch of the special military operation, and we saw what was going on in the new republics. I have quite a few relatives in the Luhansk region. We voted and we were sanctioned, and which means that we should not express our opinion. We should not express our will, because it was done by voting. And basically today we are punished for that.
Yeah.
As they think, the Western community thinks. Well, I've never had any bank accounts in the UK or the US or any real estate assets. So what kind of punishment is that? Well, those restrictions have limited our traveling opportunities, and they're trying to initiate criminal investigations or criminal cases against us. This is a kind of a bizarre policy pursued by them. Well, I guess that the foreign minister has to resolve such issues. Punishing parliament members for that sounds very bizarre.
Yeah, it is. Is it correct to say that you're prohibited from traveling to Europe and to the United States now? Is that included on the sanctions?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I think, in addition to that, there are other prohibitions. I may be arrested and called to account, or maybe called a thief. And when we went to Zakhar Prilepin, who served in the region of Luhansk, and we were bringing humanitarian aid. There were musical instruments for one of Luhansk music schools, and at the borderline, at the check-in point, there were people standing behind me who spoke Ukrainian, and it was obvious that they were speaking Ukrainian, and I had to hide the fact, conceal the fact that I was a senator, and I said that I had a different occupation, so that they did not know that I was a senator, and so that nobody could follow me or kidnap me, and we had to conceal that. Well, because there is a manhunt, and they were hunting parliamentaries, senators.
So now my understanding is Luhansk is basically completely under the control of the Russian Federation now. That the Ukrainian troops have been expelled from there. Still a few remain in Donetsk. What is your one of the criticisms that's made in the West, and I maintain these are false criticisms, but they claim that support for the special military operation is eroding, that there is growing opposition to President Putin. How would you respond to those Americans that would make such an argument?
Well, to make such statements, they will have to travel across small towns and small villages where every library, every sports facility has an exhibition without any instruction from the top. And you will see that they're collecting humanitarian aid. They are trying to help our soldiers. They need camouflage nets, and this is done in small towns and villages. I was in Khabarovsk Krai, and I went to the building of our election commission, and I saw people who were spending their free time knitting such camouflage nets. These were common people, ordinary people, ordinary voters. So nothing of the kind. It is just the reverse. Many people, very many people, whose relatives were wounded or were killed are joining the effort and are trying to help those who serve there. So it is, this argument is false. I saw it with my own eyes. I can show you photos.
Yeah, no, that's a great illustration that, as you point out, you don't command that kind of response from the top. That is, I guess the correct term is it's organic. It grows out naturally.
Everyone, from very little kids up to seniors, everyone wants these events to stop, to come to an end, better to say. And so everyone is involved in helping.
Okay. Let me ask, I want to get a little personal with you in terms of your family history. Because one of the things, that helps me is understanding the impact of the Great Patriotic War, how it affected the lives of Russians, across the country. Where did your grandparents or your great-grandparents, where were they living during the time of the Great Patriotic War? Were they back west of the Ural Mountains, or were they east of the Urals?
My grandfather was from the Urals Mountains. He used to live there after the war. He served in a tank detachment. Well, and he was in intelligence, and I think it was in 1942 when he joined the army, and in 1943 he was wounded. He had a knee wound, and he was operated on. It was near the city of Budapest, and one of his legs was 7 centimeters shorter afterwards, and he had to wear special boots, orthopedic boots. And he was rehabilitated in the city of Yalta in the Crimea, and at the end of the war he returned home, and he had category 1 disability, but he kept working at a chemical plant, and he raised 5 children after the Great Patriotic War. And I think that all the children were decent people, each of them in their own way, in his or her own way. And at least my grandfather was an example to emulate, an example to follow, and he had a lot of authority with all of us and respect.
Yeah, the kind of sacrifice that the Russian people made in overcoming the threat of the Nazis it's really it has left an indelible mark on the Russian people today. It's something that really cannot be erased from the consciousness.
Of course. And when my grandfather died in 1996, but when I was younger, I used to talk to him a lot. I was very curious to learn what was going on, what happened during the war. He was very reluctant to share, but there were certain details he shared with me about German Nazis and how much they wanted to fight and to fight the enemy, and they even pretended to be older than they were in fact to join the army. And this was a massive thing. You cannot go away from it. Those people had that spiritual foundation, and even today, these days, we have lots of such people fighting in Ukraine at the special military operations. They are the grandchildren of those grandfathers. On the other side, we have the grandchildren of grandfathers who used to wear SS uniforms. And on our side, we have soldiers who are grandsons of those grandfathers who defeated Nazism.
Well, you know, it's fascinating that, you know, in your story about your grandfather, that he was reluctant to talk about the wartime experiences. And I know from listening to documentaries and other things in the United States, there was that similar attitude among U.S. soldiers or veterans who had served in World War II on the U.S. side. And what I've seen now on the Russian side today is there have been proactive measures taken both to deal with veterans who come out of combat and getting them readjusted into society, as well as support programs for the women, the spouses, so that you know, Russia didn't wait until there was a crisis, a mental health crisis. It looks like it has been taking proactive steps to deal with that. And so are you seeing that kind of activity out where you live in the Far East?
I worked as a member of the Defense and Security Committee at the Federation Council until 2024. And when the special military operation was started, senators, the State Duma, and the government began talking about what should be done in the future, because we had to make forecasts and predictions. And we worked with the Ministry of Defense and other stakeholders to develop an action plan how to tackle such potential issues. And by the way, you won't believe me, but the National Unity Club that we've been cooperating with since day one has been involved in hands-on development of such actions.
Right, right.
And these issues were on the agenda when we talked to various convalescent institutions and rehabilitation sanatoriums, the so-called sanatoriums. And we worked with them to make sure that wounded soldiers who were being rehabilitated could restore their health and mental health there. And there was a know-how that was developed, and we've added certain adjustments. And it is not only the soldier, the officer, who will have to restore his health, but his family. They are joined by their family members, because families are also affected psychologically when something happens to a father, a husband, a brother, and they are overcoming those difficulties together. And of course, all that was developed, taken into account the experience of prior military operations. For example, in Afghanistan and Chechnya, we took lessons learned, analyzed the mistakes to develop a campaign so that everything is done in a planned way and everything is predicted in advance so that we could have local centers, health camps for such families and soldiers. And the approach developed by the Defense Ministry is different. There are special foundations established to help our veterans, and the approach is entirely different compared to what it used to be before.
Well, I commend you and what Russia is doing on that front. And in the United States, I'm a member of a foundation. It's a small group called Combat Soldiers Recovery. And it was actually originally established by my bookkeeper, the woman who handled my tax affairs. She was the neighbor of a physician who worked at the Walter Reed Medical Center. And this started 20 years ago. And there were so many wounded soldiers and Marines coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq, and you would think that the U.S. government would take care of all their medical needs, and it was not. A lot of times if they had extended recovery, they had to pay for their own food, they had to pay for cleaning supplies. So she set up a foundation to try to provide some support to them. And so I contrast that with what I'm seeing here in Russia shows both the partnership between the government and the private sector being much more proactive in dealing with this threat.
Yes, that is true. And if my understanding is correct, judging by what I've heard through the interpreter, well, it was some very crazy thing for the United States government to make their soldiers pay for food. And actually, and if we are talking about health camps, sanatoriums where people go through a rehabilitation process, they have all medical supplies, foodstuffs, there are spa procedures. It is a big and comprehensive complex, including psychological aid. And each of such centers, at least judging by the centers that we visited, and in the basement, they have a shop that makes prostheses and artificial limbs, and they can help soldiers. And of course, there have been advances in science and research. And in this respect, lots of issues have been resolved. But given the fact that any hostilities, military hostilities, any war is an expensive thing, and given that we have serious losses, and for me, a serious loss is one person or more. even losing one person is serious. I'm not going to focus on numbers, but there are losses on both sides that are quite serious. And in any case, there will be huge challenges, and everything needs to be properly aligned and arranged. We've already arranged a lot of things, and in the future, we'll ramp up those activities, because there will be a lot of attention needed in this country to provide psychological help for rehabilitation, because taking part in a war is not a hiking trip in a forest.
Yeah. The psychological trauma sometimes can be even worse than the physical trauma. You know, you can create a prosthesis for an amputated limb, but what do you do for an amputated soul?
Any special military operation, unfortunately, leads to the need to tackle this issue. We have experts in the field, and I cannot answer your comment to the full extent possible. But if you take my grandfather and the Great Patriotic War veterans, our veterans, everyone who used to hold guns in their hands, all those who faced bomb explosions had that indelible imprint on them. And many of them used to suffer after the Great Patriotic War, so that there was an imprint on their character traits even. And our social division in the Ministry of Defense is led by professionals, and I'm sure they will sort it out. A few years ago, I went to Syria to visit our military base. We also brought a humanitarian cargo there. And after this was during my senator days, when I looked at what our soldiers needed in terms of medical equipment, I sent a letter to the Ministry of Defense, and I said they need this particular equipment. It was quite unexpected that the response was instantaneous. It was so fast, and the Ministry of Defense and the Deputy Minister responsible for that demonstrated that they were putting their heart and soul in that matter, and the issue was resolved.
Great. Listen, Sergei, thank you for this conversation. We've run out of time, but it was, for me, it was time well spent. And I thank you for sharing both your own experience and providing good insights and understandings about one other thing that makes Russia special. Thank you.
Спасибо вам, что...
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.